Hi, my name's Phil. I like to come out politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss some reasoning put forward by a US Senator for Trump's tariff policy strategy. Chris Murphy from Connecticut is suggesting that Trump's tariffs are not actually an attempt to go to war with the world, but with his own country. He's explained how Trump's strategy could be less of a trade policy, more of a policy to abolish democracy in his own country. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So people continue to look for strategy in Trump's tariff policies. Now, as I keep trying to explain, there will be reasoning, which, okay, implies strategy, but it's not necessarily a strategy that is coherent. Indeed, the constant chopping and changing of it suggests that the explanation by almost every independent economist and trade expert I've listened to is probably correct. However, if you're interested in the potential for deeper thinking behind Trump's moves, then Chris Murphy, a member of the US Senate, has certainly provided an intriguing possibility. Now, yes, there's logic in his reasoning, but I will caution there are problems with his hypothesis as well. Some things which don't quite fit. That being said, if you are really desperate for an explanation that credits Trump with having a brain, which I have to say is a little bit reckless, or at least that there's a brain somewhere in the White House, then let's try this one on for size. Though afterwards, I am going to go over some of the ways in which the pieces just do not fit. So, enough rambling. What is this hypothesis? Well, it's essentially that Trump is not pursuing his trade strategy to bring the rest of the world to heel as such, but his own country. Murphy argues that Trump is using the tariffs and other trade measures to panic major forces in his own country to basically kiss the ring. That Trump wants the captains of industry to go to him begging for special consideration for their business or their sector, and Trump will grant it in return for doing exactly as he says. Now, you may be thinking that exempting smartphones and computers, for example, might have been because Apple have bent the knee to Trump in some private agreement. Murphy suggests that Trump is using his insane economic policies in order to eradicate opposition to his will in America, not around the world. Now, you could certainly see this being possible. It could also explain why he would put tariffs even on countries like the UK and Australia, with whom the USA already have a trade surplus, although there are other explanations for that as well. So, the idea is he puts tariffs everywhere, then he can exempt individual commodities from the tariffs if the American businesses and institutions which rely upon them play ball. And if their loyalty wanes, he can always cancel the exemptions at any time. Murphy talks about how Trump has already attacked what he calls 3 pillars of American democracy, threatening federal funding to universities, attack on academic research, and what he calls youth protest. I will say the development of critical thinking skills. He is attacking top law firms by cutting them off from government contracts and removing security clearance, and silencing journalists by cutting off their access to government facilities unless they publish what he wants. He argues that now Trump is using tariffs to force companies and industries to beg for White House relief with secret backroom deals. Now, what I would say about this idea is that, okay, could be used, could be a use for tariffs. However, just because it's how the tariffs could be used, and there may be indeed cases where Trump does use them in this way, I don't think it rings true for the magic bullet explanation. First of all, we have to remember Trump has held consistent views on how tariffs should be used by America to return manufacturing and to replace income tax since the 1980s, long before he could possibly have imagined being in the position he is now to leverage them for this sort of gain. So for me, the idea that the tariffs will remain and exemptions offered in return for political favours doesn't ring true to Trump's long-stated views. We must also remember that Trump is currently using other tactics to get big businesses to do as he says. Another problem is what Trump seemingly doesn't understand about trade. See, quite a lot of the countries Trump insists have got a trade surplus with America, therefore they're ripping America off, right? They actually run a deficit. America has the trade surplus with them. That is because American manufacture has certainly declined over the decades, but to make room for a surge in a service-based economy. So when you take all trade into account, America runs a healthy surplus with the world. Trump's tariffs can bring some companies to their knees, but not all. Sure, service-based industries also need to import some things, but it's not as big a deal as it is for manufacturers. Another problem is this levy at ports for Chinese-built ships. Now, I noticed the US backed down on this almost immediately. I read last night about the policy, and then this morning, oh, they've watered it down. But the policy is still nonetheless one which doesn't really allow for the exemption on certain products, because it's a levy on the ship being used. It's very much in keeping with Trump's known desire to use tariffs as a way of not only generating extra tax revenues in order to reduce income tax, but also encourage American production. The watering down will be because he'll have set the value too high, and he's just constantly fine-tuning it to the level he thinks he can get away with. You know, so the idea of this levy, by the way, is like an American bit. So your cargo, doesn't matter where the cargo comes from. It can be Chinese goods, doesn't matter. But if it comes into port on an American-built ship, it doesn't pay the port fees. If it's come on a ship built somewhere else, it'll pay port fees. If it comes on a ship built in China, it'll face the highest fees, as far as I understand it. That is a policy which has got nothing to do with the cargo. All of the available evidence points to Trump pursuing these trade policies exactly as he's been setting out consistently for decades, because he believes he can fundamentally change the way taxes are raised in America and can bring manufacturing back and be competitive in global trade. However, the reason I'm discussing these ideas of Senator Murphy and sort of disagreeing with the basic premise is not because I got bored and fancied just rubbishing a hypothesis. It's because I do think this general thinking forms part of the puzzle. Trump's tariff policies are born of the very ideas he put forward back in the 1980s. However, he is an opportunist, isn't he? I don't think the idea of tariffs is to force American companies to bend the knee at all. But I do believe that Trump is always on the lookout for any advantage in any situation. So he will certainly be on the lookout for side hustles. And that's what this could be. Now, this could take the form of deliberately raising tariffs higher than he really needs to in some areas in order to then agree to ease some in return for political favours. It won't be money either. He'll be getting plenty of that through other means. And no, not market manipulation. He's got way more lucrative means. Trump will be interested in major organisations adopting his anti-DEI policies and becoming a state mouthpiece, which would be the envy of North Korea. He'll probably even make them buy gold Trump statues for the lobbies of their headquarters. So I can certainly see how Trump will recognise the potential for enforcing his will without all that time-consuming and bothersome democratic process of pushing laws through Congress. But I don't think it's the primary reason behind his trade policy. The primary reason behind his trade policy is simply that his brain doesn't work. That's always been the case. But just because it's not the primary reason doesn't mean it won't happen. And it is certainly worth people being on the lookout for it. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.